You can call me Lee or you can call me Lucy. For those of
I
you
don't
that
know
have
if
done
you
the
guys
math.
got that. I don't know if you guys got that. Okay, so Lucy's she's now
Yeah.
revealed herself. Liana was Lucy, and Liana. That's where me and Liana met. Was in prison, and Liana became my good friend and an amazing support system for me in prison.
Same, vice
Liana helped
versa.
me through. No, but you helped me through in prison. You really genuinely did, and I think I will go till my dying day with a lot of respect for you.
Thank
You
you.
was my big sis in there.
I'm still your big
Um,
sis.
you're still my big sis, but you was my big sis in there, and you took me under your wing. You know, you had been there a little while longer than me. You knew everyone in the prison. You introduced me to everyone in the prison. I think you just set my status as soon as I met that connection we had when we first met each other. I never forget it. It was outside on the exercise bit. I think it was outside the classrooms, education, and there was a little square bit outside with smoking. And I'll never forget, we met and straight away I connected with you. All the people I come across in the prison, I couldn't connect with no one. So I was just like so stealth. I was sitting there hard. I mean, you could say I was sitting
Yeah.
there hard face. So when you come along, I was so thankful to have that. And I think even my family, like my mum, you then become one of the family because when I'm talking to mum, has Lee, she all right? Like
Your
how's
mum was
she
very good to
doing?
me. Yeah.
Yeah, like you become one of us now because you really did give me that status. You set the pace for me. So I'll always have the respect for you
Oh man,
in
vice
that
versa,
sense.
vice versa. But now I have revealed that I can reveal that prison is a very traumatic place, which doesn't
Yeah.
seek to rehabilitate anybody. And the inequalities that are in society are also in the justice system. There's a lot of women that shouldn't be there, that are co-defendants on male charges, that have all types of vulnerabilities and mental health, going through loads of domestic abuse. I mean, Cherelle and I have both
Domestic
been there
abuse.
as both been
Yeah, one of the
as a
highest.
result of domestic abuse.
Yeah, domestic abuse is something that everyone's story is in
Yeah.
prison, and that's something that you just have a normal conversation and that's thrown out there. I think we was talking the other day about one of the male screws that was actually having sexual intercourse with other women in the prison. This was very well known. I would see, you would see
Yeah.
this guy going into the cell, coming out of the cell. It was a place where it was very easy to take advantage of the women in prison. And
A
you,
lot of the male officers did, and that particular officer that
mm,
you spoke about, he would be suspended. I mean, he had a partner that was also a female officer there, and he was an absolute disgrace to her. But he would abuse, have relationships, inappropriate relationships with women, get found out, get caught, be suspended on full pay, I might add, and then they'd bring him back a few months
and come
later,
back,
and he'd do the
right?
same damn thing. So they're letting
Yeah,
these
and it was
perpetrators loose
known.
on these vulnerable women.
It wasn't hidden at all. It was a very well known fact. Like it's very easy. Like, and I'm not saying it's not in men's prisons. I'm not saying it's not at all. Yeah. So one thing I do remember about prison is every ethnic minority or culture stuck together. So you had the Romanians, the Africans. As I was saying, we're from London, so it's quite diverse. I mean, we grew up in the 90s, so we did see a lot of racism. However, we started actually coming outside when in the era of the mixed race babies and everyone's starting to mix with one another. So one thing that did strike me in prison, especially when I went over to the adult wing, because I went over to D3. You was actually on D3 with me, weren't you? You got me onto your wing, and
Oh, like yourself,
I
I'm a bit of a leader and an influencer. Use my
yeah,
charm.
yeah. You got me over to D3 with you. So yeah, so that's one thing that really, and to this day, has really stood out. You had the Jamaicans with them, the Jamaicans stuck with the Jamaicans, the Africans stuck with the Africans, the Romanians, the Polish, and then you had the drug users, and like it was very, and that's something growing up I saw in the American movies, right? In prison with the all the black people stick together, the white people.
Tribalism,
That
yeah.
was, yeah, for me, that was like, whoa, like this really is how it is. But I was able to communicate with everyone. So I used to get the African DVDs of the Africans and the Jamaicans, we used to sit there and bust joke with them. And the Romanians, they used to do the tarot cards with me. And do my readings. And when I was a wing
And
cleaner,
that's quite important because you now read tarot, don't you?
yeah, I do. So even prior to prison, I was interested in tarot. But yeah, so when the Romanians, like when I was a wing cleaner, I used to give them cards and give everyone a little extra something if there was some bread there or if there was some cereal packs. I just fling them to them, and I don't care. So yeah, so they the Romanians especially, they look really like me. They used to call me. They used to shout ages out the cell, like, Cherelle, get us this, get us that, please, we'll do you a reading tomorrow. Like, they always come through, like, they'd always give me a reading. So, yeah, so it was, that's something that stuck in my mind, though, about prison is how the cultures and the groups stick together firmly. But another thing that stuck in my mind is that our group that was together, um, wasn't so much like that. It was in the sense that we was all black or brown, right? But because we have Bigs, remember Bigs? You Bigs
Yeah, big
relations, right? Yeah, yeah. So we had a bit of a diverse group going on, which I genuinely feel represents us as people.
yeah,
And I want to say that might have been the only diverse group in that whole prison that was certified the way we was and
yeah,
always together the way we was. Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? Yeah, because it was a diverse group. So that was something, yeah, massive for me. I mean, in the end of my prison sentence, so I was on remand most of the time I was in prison. I then went to court. I then ended up taking a plea bargain. So they dropped the intent and just done me for GBH and ABH. So basically, when I ended up going to court, I had to have a little trial because the girl said I had hit her with a bottle, but as I said, it was a little mirror. So they had to determine whether that was the truth or not. In the end, they didn't. She didn't turn up for trial, so it went in my favour. And I remember writing the judge a letter, and I remember one of the lines in the letter was, "Please allow me to change my negatives into positives." Right? And he read that letter and he took and this judge was at Snaresbrook Crown Court, all the East London people. I'm sure you'll know who I'm talking about, Judge King.
Yeah.
He was a prolific judge who just used to bird everyone. And everyone in the prison, like when you go on holiday, you're at Snaresbrook, you better not get King, you're gonna get birded off. But I wrote this letter to him, and you know what? He done me good. I went back to prison that day after I got sentenced, and I remember you coming and like, what? And I was like, I've got 7 weeks left.
Freedom is a
Um,
must.
yeah, that was our line. I got 7 weeks left. So in the end, I got the minimal sentence. I got 6 months and 1 week, and I was due out in 7 weeks' time. And that last 7 weeks was all fun and games because I knew I was going home.
Mm.
It's wild what being on remand does to your brain because you don't know when you're going home. That alone is trauma
Yeah.
because you don't know when you're going home. So for me, yeah, I come out of prison, and you know what? I had a new lease of life. I never went back to my ex. I think we had communication here and there, but I never got back in a relationship with him. 2 days after I come out of prison, or the next night, I went raving, met someone else, and he became my boyfriend instantly. And we was together for a very long time. And I mean, I believe he was probably my first love. He was a really good guy, but he was a womanizer, so he cheated quite a bit. He had some kids on me. Yeah, so it, he, when I come out of prison, because I've been in a domestic violent relationship, every argument we had, I would attack him.
Mhm.
Yeah, and he never would hit me back. He just wasn't that guy. He was a very respectful guy. I still talk to him now. Very respectful guy. But yeah, as I said, he had some kids on me as a womanizer. So that ended up finishing about 6 years later. I got fed up and left that relationship. And then I met someone who I was just seeing. As I said, I'd lost, by this time, I'd lost 5 babies now, or 4 babies now. And I started seeing a guy, very much just casual. Started seeing him. Me, when I make mistakes, I make big 5G mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
A couple weeks, I think I was seeing him for about 6 weeks, got pregnant. Didn't know if I was going to keep the baby or not. In the end, I ended up keeping the baby. He promised that he was going to be there and he was going to do all of this stuff. Turns out a few weeks later, I find out he's got another kid on the way. He's not who I thought he was. He told me he'd owned businesses and shops. He didn't own any of this stuff. And he was right, a real, I want to say, bum. Yeah, he couldn't offer nothing. He couldn't offer nothing to my child. Promised he'd be there, ended up not being there. So I went through this pregnancy on my own. I've got a blood clot disorder. So when I'm pregnant, I have to inject in my belly every day because
Okay.
the blood. So every single day I have to inject in my belly and take different meds because. So this is why I had lost so many babies because my blood clots when I get pregnant. So they're unable to eat food. The baby eats
Okay.
off the mum's placenta. They was unable to because my blood clots. So it was a very difficult pregnancy. I was 27 at the time, and then I had my little boy,
You got your miracle
my
baby.
firstborn. Yeah, and I'm gonna call him C for the purpose of
Big.
yeah, my big C. I'm gonna call him C for the purpose of the podcast.
Yeah.
But he, at the time, so when I got pregnant, I just started university studying criminology in the criminal justice system. 3 months into the course, actually, and I got pregnant. And as I said, very difficult pregnancy. I had to defer the year in the end. I gave birth to him, and he gave me life. He really did give me life. He gave me a new reason for existence. He was my rainbow baby.
It's beautiful.
I'd lost so many babies, so he was my rainbow baby, and I had this little brown, coolie looking baby. So his father is half Jamaican, half Asian. Half Jamaican, half Asian. As I said, my mix.
Hmm.
He had these big blue, green, grey eyes. And he was just the cutest baby I'd ever seen. And it was just the happiest year of my life. I've never experienced happiness quite like it.
Hmm.
He was everything to me. Just done everything. So he caught C was probably a very big turning point in my life.
Yeah.
It was when I first experienced unconditional love. Everything was just great. That first year of having him, although I was very tired and I was a single mom, but it didn't matter. Everything was great. I mean, I was so motivated and felt so good after having him, and I had a C-section with him. I felt so good and stuff. I went back to university 3 months later after having him. So I was just in a very different place. And life was great. I when C was 3 years old, I went through therapy. I actually went through psychotherapy. So I went back to my childhood and started to untangle all of my traumas, all of the post-traumatic stress disorder, all of started to understand all of my triggers and gain an understanding of the things that had happened to me in the past, which helped me tremendously. 2 3 years I went through psychotherapy for 2.5 years, I think it was, and it changed my life.
Helpful.
Really did change my life. Very helpful. Prior to this, I'd already started working with young people. And what I didn't say earlier is I was put in front of therapists from the age of 10, stuck in front of therapists, but I didn't understand it. I needed to have that experience in prison to slow down and stop, reflect, do my own self reflection
Hmm.
before anyone could come in to problem solve and help me to understand my triggers and my post traumatic stress disorder.
Hmm.
I had to have at least the self awareness. So, yeah, so I got in such a great space once I had, and that's when once I had, that's when I started going hard with the young people, and really, as I said, I was in university at the time. I trained to be a life coach. On the side, I started working in Newham College with young people. I started doing my own workshops, and really started to support young people going through trauma.
But you do have to
Yeah,
deal, you have to deal with your own trauma to a certain degree before you're safe to deal with other people's, and that's something that I pointed out.
100%. And you know what? Like, so I first started with the young people. It I didn't work with young people at the very beginning. I started a mentor group with a church once I come out of prison for women going through domestic violence. It just so happened that all of the women are part of that mentor group, and it was only about 8 or 9, happened to be young.
Hmm.
And I was young at the time. I think I was 22 at the time. So they happen to be young. And I'm talking like 17, 18 young, all of them. So that kind of solidified me wanting to work with young people around trauma and not just the DV. And then I want to say that was probably the motivation for me going therapy, along with my baby that I just had. Like I didn't want to pass the generational curses. I didn't want to pass that on to him, and I wanted, as I said, my mum was very detached emotionally with me. I didn't want to be like that. And I couldn't be like that with this little boy. I just loved him so much. I just wanted to hug him all the time and kiss him all the time. He's 10 years old now. I still hug him all the time, kiss him all the time. Like, it's like, Mom, you're embarrassing me. And I will embarrass you till my last breath, right? I'm going to be kissing and hugging all the time. So I think that was my motivation to go through therapy. Had I not gone through therapy, I wouldn't have been equipped to support and help these young people go through uh, and recognize their triggers and their trauma and understand their trauma. You can't if you're not willing to help yourself, you can't help anyone else, and it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
You have to be able to understand your own traumas, your own triggers, in
Yeah.
order to help anyone else. And that was massive for me, and that's why I took therapy at that moment very extremely serious, because I knew I was on a mission and I knew what I had to do to help these young people, and that was understand myself.
So so you,
Go
you
on.
you kind of come through this period. You've come out of prison. You've been to university. You've started to change your life. You've been through therapy. You've had this miracle baby, and I assume there was a period of time when things are going okay. But can you talk me through the last five
Great.
years?
Yeah, so first 5 years with say great. As I said, started doing going hard with the young people, started working for local authorities, colleges, stuff like that with the young people. My local YOS, worked in the YOS in Plasto. So yeah, really started focusing and lasering in on the career. This is how I started to become a specialist in serious youth violence and exploitation.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so that's that. Career, everything's going great, life's going great. So the last 5 years have been, yeah, topsy turvy. I would say I'm gonna, as I said, great up until I'd say 2022. Yeah, so that's the last couple of years now. So 2022, I was now working for Hackney local authority, working mental health, working with young people going into tier 4 settings. So young people that are going into mental health hospitals or coming out of mental health hospitals. I tell you that had a massive impact on me, because as I said, I'm used to working with the young people who are in the gangs, exploitation. Give me a missing person, give me a person that's been arrested for a gun or a knife, or I know what to do straight away. I went into Hackney in this clinical setting when it was the clinical setting was something a little bit different for me. However, as I said, I've studied at university. I am educated. I understand. I'm working with young people now that genuinely want to take their lives. I had a young person that had taken an overdose, 56 mental health tablets, antidepressants. She had to have her stomach pumped, genuinely nearly died. I'm working with young people going through psychosis. Yeah, an amazing team. And just to say that when we started this team, it was a very new team. So the people that was on the team, including myself, had to come up with a whole structure of this team. The team was called Surge. So we come up with a whole structure. And although we was in the clinical team, we were not therapists. We were not actual clinicians. We all had our own titles. We wasn't clinicians, but we had the backing of the clinical team, so there was clinicians around us to get information from. But this has had a massive impact on myself and my mental health, and took a lot. I'm someone that I I think all of my managers have said to me, I do too much.
Mm.
Yeah. So when I advocate for my young people, I advocate for my young people. When I'm working on a case, I work on a case for the young people. Throughout my career, I've done a lot of very good things in my career. One time, I brought down a paedophile ring for girls that were being sold online, and I worked on this case for a year, right? You know, when you get a bee in your bonnet and you don't stop, and I knew I had a gut feeling and I did not stop. Everyone else stopped, I would not stop, right? I just continued. And don't get me wrong, like there was other social workers, there was an exploitation police officer involved, but every time we got close, everyone would back up again because it wouldn't go to plan, whereas I didn't. So I ended up getting the actual confession of what's going on, brought it to the table. It's a massive thing in the local authority I work for. And then there's people that are in their 50s, have been through their career for the last 40, 30 years, saying to me, like, people work their whole lives to try and do what you've done
Yeah.
in this year, but that's just who I am. I don't know how to balance
Yeah,
my
you're all
professional.
in, so you're
Yeah.
gonna have issues with balance. So
mm,
you've done these amazing things. You've come out of prison. You put all of these things to use. You're helping young people. But what's going on
so by
for you?
2022, I
Mm,
hit burnout, hit complete burnout. I get cysts on my vocal cords. I had got some cysts on my vocal cords.
mhm,
But this time round, so usually when I get a cyst, my voice will go hoarse. I'll lose my voice. Obviously, I use my voice to work, right? So I'm going to work, barely got a voice there, little squeak coming out of my mouth. Usually, after a week or two, my voice will come back. This time
mm.
it didn't come back. So after about 6 weeks, so I need to go to the hospital to find out what's actually happening. So off I went to the hospital, got seen in the emergency department. They've put the camera down me to check. They've seen the cyst. They said this cyst don't look right, and they don't. It could be cancerous. So they've got to refer me emergency. I was already under ear, nose, and throat, but anyway, they got to refer me, do an emergency referral within 2 weeks. That's what they done. Got over a woman. This that got referred over to one of the top doctors at Royal London Hospital. This woman was actually the head specialist of the throat, head, and
Definitely.
cancer clinic.
Yeah, yeah.
So I had all these tests, and I had to get the results and do a biopsy to make sure it's not cancerous. In the interim, I think from going to the hospital to getting the operation must have been about 5 weeks. When had this operation, turns out it wasn't cancerous, thank the Lord. But in that time, in the interim, I did believe I all sorts was going through my head. What's going to happen with my child? Am I going to make it? I'm someone that smokes 20 fags a day, and I have done since teenage years. And as terrible as it is, that's my stress reliever. Even though I have these issues with my throat, some will say I'm silly for that, and I am silly for that. But that is my stress reliever. I still smoke, so you just think the worst. Anyway, at that time, after I had the operation, voice still didn't come back. So I was off of work for a period of about 4 months at that time. And this is the first time in a lot of years that I've slowed down and I've had to be at home. And I strive with routine. Like, that's my thing. So I'm getting up in my head when I'm at home. I'm physically unwell. Mentally now, I'm stressed as well because I've got all these cases with my young people. And remember, they're in hospital and stuff. They don't understand that I'm ill. I can't be there. They rely on me. I'm holding the work guilt, the parent guilt. I've got a lot of guilt on me. And I'm doing this life on my own. I'm a single parent. My mum, as I said, she had me when she was 16. She works. So I don't get support with my children. Like I'm solely their caregiver, care provider. I don't have someone, they don't go on the weekends and stuff, right? So I'm sick. I've had to go into theatre. I've got no voice. I've still got to be a parent 24/7, no respite, other than when he's at school. I'm stressing about work and my cases and my young people. I'm then stressing about being at home and thinking too much, overthinking in my head.
Mhm.
At the time, I've been in a relationship with my partner at the time for the last 3 years, 2.5 years. And that was a good relationship, but the relationship wasn't going great at the time. So I had that relationship stress on my head as well. Um, yeah, so that was that. Eventually my voice come back, went back to work. I'm sorry, I said I'd been in a relationship 2.5 years, 3 years. I don't know, I'd been in a relationship about 4 years by this point.
Yeah.
As I said, relationship was not, it was failing. Down to again, trauma bonds. He'd been through a lot of traumas. I've been through traumas, but we're in different places. I've worked through mine. He hasn't his.
Yeah.
His life's chaotic. I don't want the chaos. So we're just not on the same page at the moment. So anyway, we broke up shortly after, around the time when I got sick. Broke up, and this time I thought it was for real, for real. So we're at the end of 2022 now.
Mm.
So beginning of 2023, I started talking to someone else, someone that knows mutual people that I know, comes from the same place that I know. And this guy wooed me. He wooed me. He was the kind of person that would sit on the phone, sorry, sit on the phone to you all night long, fall asleep on the phone. He was just the perfect gentleman.
Yeah.
Told me he had a job and told me he would painted a picture of himself that was just a load of rubbish. Really wasn't him, right? Yes. So I ended up meeting up with him. As I said, I'd broken up with my partner at the time, and in my head, I just thought it was over. Really was over now. And again, as I said, when I make mistakes, I don't make them often because we're 10 years apart now, right? But when I do make the mistakes, Cherelle makes 5G mistakes, right? So they're very massive mistakes, right? So yeah, met up with this guy, ended up, yeah, a couple of weeks later. Well, yeah, a couple of weeks later, then after I met up with him and stuff, he started bucking up and everything starts changing and
Yeah.
everything's different now. Haven't come on my period.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, here we go again. Done a test, right? And when I was doing this test, I remember I had a test in my drawer, in one of my kitchen drawers. So I said, oh, let me look for this test. I've looked for the test. This test was wrapped up in paperwork of my other son's birth when I had him. So I was like, I don't even need to do the test because I know it was a sign.
Oh my God.
So I done the test. I was pregnant. Let this guy know I was pregnant again because I was so this we're at the beginning of 2023 now. Because I was so career focused, like I genuinely, I think with C, my older C, I didn't know whether to keep him or not due to the relationship with his father. However, slyly knew I was gonna really keep him. Whereas with my little C, my baby, I I was more didn't want to keep him because I had been there. I'd done that. Oh, I've got this massive fear of being a single parent now. As I said, I just finished a relationship with someone that I was bang in love with and the impact that would have on him. So there were so many reasons not to have him. At the time, I was going for a job, a different job, a new job, back at a local authority I'd already worked at, and it was a job where I'd have to do weekends and stuff. There's a better paid job, and I knew these people as well, so there was a very good chance that I was going to get this job. So I basically based my decision on whether I get the job or not. And I went to the job interview. As I said, I knew the manager who was interviewing me, didn't know the other person, and he basically told me by the end of the interview, I've got the job. So in my head, to the doctors, get an abortion sorted. I'm not having my baby. I'm going to take the job. So anyway, next week, I'm still at Hackney these times, working in Hackney. Next week, he called me and he said, look, I'm sorry I ain't called you. There's a bit of delay. I can't tell you whether you've got the job right now, but I will in the next 24 hours. So I was like, okay, this is a bit weird because, when I was walking out the door from the interview, he's winking at me, like letting me
Yeah.
know I've got the job. So anyway, when he's called back the next day, he said basically I scored exactly the same as someone else, and it had to go to head office for them to mark it, and they'd marked me down on one thing on my written assessment, and unfortunately, I haven't got the job. And I remember this was on my lunch break as well at work, and I remember standing just in some blocks, like in a doorway, and crying my eyes out because I had promised myself if I didn't get the job, I was going to keep this baby.
Yeah.
And equally, if I did get the job, I weren't keeping the baby. So that's it now. I'm keeping the baby. Yeah, so the week later, he called me back and he said, "Oh, I want to offer you the job."
Oh, for goodness sake, what are you
But at
talking
this
about?
time
Get the hell out of
now,
here.
yeah, this time now, I've made my decision. I've got to keep the baby. So I've said, look, I've spoken to my work. They've offered me something else. I'm going to stay where I'm at. I'm not coming. I'm not going to take the job. So I'm doing this again on my own, right? The guy that I've got pregnant with, again, same mistake as the 10 year ago one. He's being very shady. I keep talking to him, like telling him we need to have a conversation. At that time, remember, I didn't know whether I was keeping the baby or not. He wants to know if I am or not. He said he weren't ready to have no more kids, but he will support my decision regardless. But was being very shady. This is all messaging. He weren't talking to me on the telephone. So yeah, so then I've let him know I'm keeping the baby. So okay, like we'll have conversations in the future, whatnot, whatnot. Again, I've got to inject again this pregnancy. Obviously, it's 10 years later. Now, what, 37? Complete different pregnancy to when I was 27. Got all these complications, but I don't know how I made it through the pregnancy. Awful time. I was back at work from the throat stuff for about 5 months. Had to go off sick again. That was it. I knew I weren't going back to work after that. It
Yeah.
was it. So I went off sick for nearly the entire 2023. I think I fully went off sick from June 2023. Started my maternity October 2023.
Mhm.
My baby C was born
Mhm.
in November 2023.
He's our special guest today, by the way.
Yes, if you can hear
If
him,
you wonder what Cherelle's doing
he is
down
our special guest. And if you, I am at the moment, I've got a full 13-month-old now, and
there.
he's just acting up. So I've got him in the pram right now, right next to me. Yeah. So I'm just trying to console the baby.
Yeah,
So yes,
this is
so
what we do. We multitask, babes.
yeah, and this is the reality of real life. This is the reality of being a single parent, and I know a lot of people can resonate as well. And the traumas that single parenthood brings to parents, and a lot of the time is mothers. Don't get me wrong, there is single fathers too, but it's not easy. But it is what it is at this point, and we keep going and we keep moving. And I know a lot of single parents that are very very strong. Single parents are extremely strong. But yeah, so
You
yeah, I've had him during that pregnancy. I think I was about 6.5 months pregnant. Throughout the pregnancy, the guy just weren't communicating with me. I think I had a couple of phone calls with him, and he said to me, "I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna really like be there for you." And then he wanted to come and see me, but he had painted this picture of him previously that I had not seen since I've been pregnant. So I was like, I don't want to see you until I've had the baby, basically. Yeah, because he wasn't there for any scans, all the appointments. I was at the hospital every week. He never came, he never asked. So by this time, when you want to see me, I don't want to see you. I don't want to be around you. I don't nothing. When we've had the baby, we'll have to restart and try again. Anyway, I was about 6.5 months pregnant, and I'd blocked him on WhatsApp by this time, and I'd seen that he's got a scan picture on his page. I'd only sent him 2 scan pictures throughout my whole pregnancy, and I had scans every other week. I had blocked him, so it only comes up small, but I knew this weren't my scan picture. Um, so I'd messaged him, "You having a baby?" He said, "Yeah." As I said, we knew mutual people. So I called one of his friends, so-called friends. He said this person wasn't his friend. He told me all about him. He had just had a baby. So the scan picture was a previous scan picture. The baby was weeks old at this time. The boy never worked. The boy had just been stabbed up in a bowel hostel that he lives in for bumping someone. He'd moved over to South London now, and like living his life with this chick and this baby. The girl was quite young, so he could manipulate her mind and stuff. So from when I found that out, I was kind of just like, you know what, you've been here before. You're doing it on your own again. It is what it is, kind of thing. He knew when the baby was due and stuff. Never heard from him. Never heard from him from this day. So when baby C was born, I did send him one picture of him. and a message. Never heard anything back. Never asked me his name. Never asked me his date of birth. Never asked me absolutely anything about him. And equally, I wouldn't go to him and ask him for anything because he's just not capable of doing what I would expect to do. So yeah, it is what it is. Anyway, see, baby C was a little bit different from Carter, from Big C,
Yeah.
because he was born with a hole in his heart. So it's quite a traumatic pregnancy, very traumatic labor as well. Had another C-section. Baby C had swallowed some fluid. So the baby team was working on him. I didn't get that golden hour. They took him off. He already, when he was born, had to have like a tube, feeding tube to check if he had some stomach issues. And then we come out of hospital and I was waiting for him to be seen by the heart team and go through all these tests and stuff, which we did. He was born in the November. By the December, so he'd had heart scans and stuff. He has got a hole in the heart, but by the February, this is February 2024 now, we was told that he was okay. He's got this heart, but it should close on its own. And if it does stay open, it shouldn't be any bigger. So up until from November to Feb, I was very protective of baby C. I didn't come out my house. It was winter. Didn't let anyone touch him. I remember a couple of friends like seeing him in the pram, got to touch him. I'm like, no, don't touch him. They're looking at me like I'm crazy. I didn't have my sisters. Well, my sisters have seen him, but the kids hadn't seen him. Yeah, so T, she's got twins, and then Bo has got one daughter. She's the young. She was the youngest one other than my baby C. So I hadn't had the kids around him. Kept us all away at Christmas because I was just really frightened that he was going to get an infection that was going to affect the hole in the heart.
Hmm.
So we got the all clear in February, but I'd kind of got the all clear in Jan when they done the heart scan. They said, look, we can't tell you infinity, but we think he's all right. So January, it was the twins' birthday. We all went on a family day out for the twins' birthday,
That's your
bowling, something to eat.
that's your niece and nephew.
Yeah, so that's my sister T, her twins. So that was the first time they got to see baby C. And it was just such a beautiful day. Like it's now become one of the best memories of my life. Yeah, one of the best days of my life. So yeah, so February got the all clear. So now I'm a bit more relaxed with baby C and doing a bit more stuff with him and going around the family a bit more. The last time we'd all got together was Jan, the twins' birthday. Yeah, so fast forward now to March. So I've had a few weeks of being a bit more relaxed and relaxed. Fast forward to March, my niece and nephew, my twins, they become ill, hand, foot, and mouth disease. They become ill. Flu-like symptoms, basically. Anyway, my nephew had been ill for a few weeks. So one evening, I'm on the phone to my sister, and he's he'd been to the doctors previously a couple of times for this. They hadn't given him antibiotics, but they said, "Oh, he's all right," kind of thing. It's just going to take some time. By this time, he's been ill for about 3 weeks now, but improved a bit, gone back to school. But then this particular night, 3 weeks later, it deteriorated again. And I was on the phone to my sister, speaking to my sister, and like I'm telling her, open the window, put the tiger balm in the water, so it evaporates around the room. Asthma pump him up. Yeah, so we had agreed that he needs to be seen. It was a Saturday night, so it would have been the Sunday next morning. So she was going to take him in the morning to the hospital, get my mum to run her down there just to check him out. The baby woke up on a Sunday morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. Usually, he'll wake up, he'll cry, I'll go and make him a bottle. By the time I come back, I would have done his nappy, the bottle will be cool, give him the bottle, he'll go back to sleep. This particular morning, he cried, woke up, when I made him the bottle. By the time I come back to his cot, he was back asleep. Never had happened before. He'd always cry until he got the bottle. So I kind of just left him, went outside on my balcony to smoke a fag, a morning fag, really tired. So I wanted to go back to sleep. But usually I've got my phone in my dressing gown pocket or whatever. Happened to put my phone on the kitchen side when I went outside to smoke. So when I've come back in, I had a missed call from my sister. So called her back, can't get through, it's gone straight to voicemail. So automatically I thought my nephew, he's a T as well, so I'll call him Little T. I thought she had gone to the hospital with my little T.
Mm.
So I just thought she had no reception, she'll call me in a minute. I messaged her, is Little T okay? No, actually, I'm gonna say his name, Trey. Is little Trey okay? I messaged her, is Trey okay? And she didn't message back nothing. So now I'm like just waiting for the response. About 5, 10 minutes later, I got a phone call. I answered the phone and she said, Cherelle, Trey's dead. And I just started screaming. Obviously, the kids are dead. The kids are asleep. So I'm in the bedroom and I've just started screaming, no, 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 no. Um, So like I don't know who put the phone down on who, but we put the phone down on one another. I've called one of my friends, like screaming, "Get to my house! Get to my house!" Because obviously I need to go, but I got the kids. The kids have woke up. My big C, he's my boy. Is like, "What's going on? Tell me what's going on." So he's just woke up to me screaming, devastated, going crazy. Um, so like, I'm on the phone to my friend. Obviously, my big boy is 10. He knows he can hear. He's
Yeah.
getting a bit of a picture, but he doesn't know that his cousin's dead. So I said to him, "All right, Trey is ill. He's at the hospital." Um, when my sister called me, she was still at her house. My other sister, Bo, had gone over to our house. The paramedics have come and they worked on him for a good hour, an hour and a bit. My friend lives quite a while away from me, so she's come to my house. By the time she's got here and I've got dressed and stuff, the ambulance have just pulled off from my sister's house to take him to hospital. So they've been trying to resuscitate all this time. So I remember my friend coming and she's like, I'm like, not calling back no one. I ain't called my mum back. I ain't called my sister back. I ain't called no one back because slightly I didn't want to talk to no one because that made it real. Um, so anyway, when my friends got here, she's like, "What's the update?" I don't know. I ain't called. She's like, "You need to call." So she's called my youngest sister, Bo. Um, and she's like, obviously, just zoned out and stuff. She said, "I don't know what's going on. I'm following the ambulance to the hospital." Cool. And my mom's called me. And my mum said to me, "Look, you need to get to the hospital. You need to come to the family room." When she said you need to come to the family room, I was on the balcony at the time smoking with my friend, and I just collapsed on the chairs on my balcony crying. Come off the phone to my mum. My friend's like, "Look, come on, you've got to be strong." I know he's dead. I said he's dead.
Mm.
Yeah, they're not sending us to the family room. I know he's dead. And she's like, "No, you don't know that. You don't know that." Anyway, she's like, so I'm now messing around in my house, getting baby bags together, but I'm doing it on purpose. I'm taking my time on purpose. I don't want to leave, right? I know what's to come. I don't want to go. I just had this feeling. So in the end, she just said, because she was going to take the kids back to her house, she said, "Look, Cheryl, you need to go. Just going to stay at your house and watch the kids, but you need to go." So I got my shoes on, got in the cab. I remember the whole time in the cab, I was sitting there praying because it happened to be my grandfather's anniversary the next day, 5 year anniversary the next day. So I'm just talking to my grandfather, like, don't let Trey be dead. Bring him back to me, whatever, whatever. In the cab the whole way there. It was raining this morning, so by these times, 9:30, 10 o'clock, I've got out of the cab and across the way, like in the hospital car park, I can see my mum and my sister T, whose son it is, on a ramp. And my sister's going, "No, no, no." And my mum's looking over her, like cuddling her, consoling her. And then I see my mum's friend coming towards me. And she was like halfway towards me. And I said, "Is he alive?"
Mm.
She said, went like that. And I remember it was raining. I remember just looking up at the sky, dropping to the floor, screaming, screamed so hard. And I screamed so hard, I put my mouth into the ground to stop myself from screaming. I remember the floor was wet and my legs was like jelly. I couldn't stand nothing. And then I just walked over to my mom and my sister and we just stood there hugging and crying and cuddling. My other sister was in, Bo was in I think with Trey. About 5 minutes later, she's come outside of the hospital, so I'm standing there hugging her. We're crying, and then like I'm like, all right, where's Trey? I need to go to Trey. Um, and I had to go and sit there with my 7-year-old nephew and just watch him be there. No reaction, no nothing. And I think all the traumas I've been through in my life, everything, and you know, like I've touched upon them. I haven't gone into them. Nothing compared, nothing compared to this. And he's a twin as well, so that's just, you know, you don't see one without the other. I'm gonna say N.
Cool.
You don't see N without Trey. You know, you don't see Trey without N. Even to this day, I still say the twins. I
Yeah.
still say N and Trey. Trey and N. You know, like I still cannot talk about Trey in the past tense. I have
How
to
long has it
talk.
been? How long has it been now?
So that was March 2024. We lost Trey 17th of March 2024.
St. Patrick's.
Yeah, St. Patrick's Day. Well, I've got his birthday coming up in the next few weeks.
Oh my goodness. Just had Christmas.
Just like Christmas. So it's all the first at the moment. Um, we gave him the best send off. We we have been brought closer together as a family. Yeah, we've been brought closer together as a family. I don't think you'll ever get over something like that.
How do you manage? Just I'm just curious because obviously, you know, you're an adult and your sisters and you know as adults we kind of understand a bit more how to process grief. But I'm just thinking of like Big C, you know, suddenly
Mm.
not having his cousin. How do you manage his grief as well as your own?
Something so probably my biggest challenge this year
Yeah.
has been so Big C, he's very much like me in one sense. He is very stubborn. I'm very stubborn, right? But he's also, in the other sense, he, I, I don't see that leadership, them leadership qualities and skills in him. He's very much of a follower. So in school, he'll get in trouble and stuff like that. And the school will call me, and it's not that I don't believe them, but I'm like, Mercy, because he
Yeah.
don't act like this at home, you know. But when he's with his friends, the influence is there. So one thing that probably has been the hardest thing this year is I've had to watch him do the I don't care attitude at home, and that was instant with him. Like I just had to give him a look, and he would stop doing what he was doing. You can see in his eyes, he don't care.
Yeah.
He doesn't care. So it's been very, and you know, like Trey was the only other boy, the rest of the girls, other than Baby C, but Trey was the only other boy, and them two had a love-hate relationship. Trey was autistic,
Hmm.
and Trey didn't know how to. He was young, isn't it? But he didn't know how to where to direct his anger, so he direct it at
Yeah.
everyone. I laughed because Trey was probably the biggest character out of all of the kids, all of the family. To be
Yeah.
fair, when Trey was there, you knew Trey was there. You know, Trey would tear up the whole house, right, and then hug you after. But when I mean tear up the whole house, he would tear up the whole house. I guess because I work with the young people, me and Trey had a very special relationship, we had a very special bond. I understood his anger,
Hmm.
I understood his frustration, where I've come from and who I've been. And I used to deal with Trey very different to what everyone else. Everyone else will get frustrated and lose patience, whereas I'd get down to Trey's level. And, you know, like with my niece N, it'll be who's your favorite auntie? Auntie Bo. With
Yeah.
Trey, Auntie Shell.
Yeah.
Me and Trey were locked in. He was my little hero boy. They were twins. They were born early, so they've been through a lot in their lifetime. Um, and he was always just my little hero boy. So our bond was solidified. You know, even with C, with my big C, I used to say Trey's my favorite. He's my favorite because I just had that connection with him. He was my favorite, and I had so many visions and dreams that when Trey grows up, I was going to be the person to support him. I was going to help him with his anger. I was going to help him understand that Auntie's been to prison and Auntie used to get very angry and Auntie this, I was going to be the one to help Trey, and not being able to do that, and then being given behaviors. It was almost like my big C had this massive loss and started mirroring behaviors that Trey had displayed. And I'm grieving, so I don't know how to support my big C. So that's been a very difficult, and we're still in the process of that. However, what we do is in the evening we'll go outside and we look at the skies and we talk about Trey and we talk to Trey because he's a boy. And my big C, he's a very sensitive boy. So he's very in touch with his emotions, his feelings. But he's now getting older. And, it's just natural for boys to shut off their emotions and feelings. So as a boy, he's naturally started to do that. Not as much as what boys do, because as I said, he's very sensitive. But I give him that space to be able to talk about his feelings and his emotions so he knows that's okay. There's been a lot of screaming and shouting in my household this year. Like I don't like to shout at my kids because that's something my mum always used to do with me. I got traumas from that. That triggers me. But this year, that's all gone out the window, and the patients weren't there. So if C's doing something wrong, I would start screaming and shouting. But equally, we always have them conversations as to why I screamed and shouted, or what we are feeling, how we are feeling, and it's just keeping that communication going with him. Unfortunately, October. So Trey died in the March. October. So my grandmother had dementia. She was in a nursing home, and one particular day, a couple days after her birthday in October, my mum calls me and um, says your nan's gonna die. Say goodbye to her over the phone. So I was like, no, 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 because my nan was my queen. Um, I've always said this. My mum was more like my sister growing up. My nan was my mum,
I can
and
I
that's
can I
that.
can resonate with you.
Yeah, that's that. She had me very young. My nan was that person, that responsible person, the one that showed me the love, the one that showed me everything, the one that taught me, my teacher. But my grandmother was the person that, actually schooled me and taught me. So I had always said, her last breath, I'm going to be there. I'm going to hold her hand. So a dear friend of mine, she come and got me. She's
Ah,
zooming through, got me to Ilford where my nan was, and I'm in Newham, so she got me to Ilford. And the whole time I'm just saying, I hope it ain't happen. I hope it ain't happen. I got in the room. She's still alive, breathing very heavily. Her son's there. My mum's there. So I sat next to her. They've got the TV radio on. So I said, turn it off. Told her what I had to tell her. Like just never leave us and stay with us, and how much I loved her, and thanked her for being that person in my life. Turned the TV off, and then I got my phone. So me and Big C always used to dance and sing "Lean on Me" with her. So that was our song. So we used to sing that all the time. So I played "Lean on Me," and then she used to party to "Sweet Caroline." So my mom said, "Play Sweet Caroline." So we put "Sweet Caroline," and then my grandfather's song was Frank Sinatra. Um, oh, what's it?
which
You
one?
know the
My Way.
shut down. No, shut down in April.
Oh, shut
I
down in May. It's the Joker
Yeah,
song. I can't remember what it is now. I
yeah,
got it
yeah,
in my head.
yeah. Do you know what? That was us. That was us this day as well. My mum was telling me it was something, and I was saying it's not that. It's
Yeah.
another song, but we found it. So I played that song about half an hour after I've got there. And she died in that song.
No.
Yeah, she died in that
I,
song. She
I, I
weren't
feel
able to.
I feel it for you, Shell, because this is still very recent. It's still very
Yeah,
recent.
this is October. This is
Yeah.
this is months ago, weeks ago. Um,
I'm like seven, eight
and
years on from losing my grandmother, who was your
yeah,
grandmother was to you, and I can tell you that it changes a little bit, but I think every time I think of her, I feel the same. It's like it's something that just stays with you. But the fact that you had a chance to say goodbye, I think
Yeah,
that will
yeah,
console you in years to come.
yeah. And I firmly believe she waited for me to come because my mum had me on loudspeaker and I said, "Nan, I'm coming. Don't, I'm coming. You wait for me, Nanny." And then I think the comfort comes from that song. The comfort comes from that song because, you know, she went in my grandfather's song. Like to
Yeah.
me, that was like my grandfather and Trey were waiting for her. They were there.
And
And
she
she went,
completed life, so it's almost like the order of things where
yeah,
what's
yeah,
happened
yeah,
to
yeah,
Trey is against the natural order of things, and that's where
exactly.
grief becomes complicated.
And for me, it was, like she done her time here. She said, I've got a job to do now. I need to go. I need to be with Trey before Christmas.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm gonna go and be with Trey before Christmas.
And you lot got each
And
other.
yeah, yeah. And you lot take care of one another, but I'm gonna go and take care of Trey. And that's given me massive comfort knowing that Trey's got the best person taking care of him, like my nan. And you know what? My nan was such a beautiful soul, such a beautiful person. It's just crazy to me that she gets one of the kids. She gets because she was just that person. She was such a special person. She gets one of the kids. And as I said, Trey had gone through, he didn't know where to put his anger and stuff. So I know now Trey's no longer angry anymore. He isn't autistic anymore. He isn't anything anymore other than happy. And he's with my nan. My nan's taking care of him and they're happy and they're in this better place and they will be waiting for us at the other end.
Watching
But
over, they're watching
what
over you.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. And what comes with the grief is just hell. Like your life stops. The grief, like I tell you, when Trey died, it was like time stopped, and then time started going again, and then my nan died, and then time stopped again, and you're just like floating through life. I looked in the mirror and I was like, I've aged 5 years, like in this one year. October, I'd lost 2 stone. By December, I put the 2 stone back on. Like life is up, down, up, down, up, down. Like every day. I'm so sad.
Mm.
24. I've been so sad. Like there's not one day I've been happy. I can't even put a smile on my face. Like usually I'd be able to put a smile on the face for the neighbors. I don't no more. I don't even bother doing it. It's been the worst. It was the worst year ever. Like, and I had a lot of. No, I've still got it, and I'll always have it, and it's okay to have it. But I can't live my life thinking like this. But I had a lot of guilt on my heart, on my head, because I was on the phone to my sister that night, and I felt I should have called the ambulance. I should have known better because I knew we
It's
weren't
something that
right.
went through my mind. Me knowing you as well as I know you,
Mm,
and us being the older sisters and the ones that our families look to. I know that I would probably feel the same, even though it's not rational. Do you know what I'm saying? It's
mm,
not your fault. There's
mm,
nothing, you know,
mm.
but you're going to take that on.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, so that just ate me all year. All year, it ate me, all 2024. And like, I almost felt like, so when Trey died, I was due to go back to work October, but the contract at work, the surge team wasn't getting renewed. They had offered me a new job. So it, it, it happened to work out that my maternity had to be ended and I had to go back to work by April. So when I spoke to my manager, she was like, "No, go off sick." Went off sick for 3 months. In that 3 months, I'd reflected, I can't go back and do that job. How am I supposed to go and do that, going through what I'm going through? Like,
Yeah.
I can't give myself, or there's no way I can give
And
these
this
young
is
people.
very important, and I hope you guys are listening to this, but it is very important. You cannot work with traumatized people or maybe potentially people going through grief if you're grieving yourself. It wouldn't be
Yeah,
fair.
and
It wouldn't be fair to them. I didn't
no,
work
it
to
just,
grieve
it
for
wasn't.
3 years after my nan died.
Yeah, it wasn't fair for them. But these young people are trying to unalive themselves,
Yeah.
right? And there's me going through all this grief for my 7-year-old nephew who was autistic. And I know you know a lot about autism, but you also know about the life expectancy of someone who has autism, like and that was playing on me, grinding me a lot. So for me, it was like I can't go back to work. So I had a conversation with my manager, and I mean, I've got a baby. When Trey died, he was 4.5 months. I've got a baby. I'm a single parent to my bigger boy. I'm now like not working. I'm on benefits. I'm getting a quarter of the wage because I was on quite a good wage. I worked for a local authority on a really good wage, covered my bills for both parents, even though I'm one parent, plus my childcare, plus we could go on holiday every year. So I'm not working now. I've got to adjust to this life on benefits. So I'm getting a quarter of the money, can't cover my bills. I can't get out of bed every day, but I've got no choice to get out of bed every day because of the baby.
Hmm.
I'm not sleeping. I'm sleep deprived. Like babies don't sleep through the night. They're not working on your time.
Yeah.
So life was hard in 2024. But my thing was because I didn't call the ambulance. This
Yeah.
is my payback.
No.
This is why my life has ended up like
You
this.
know we're
This
gonna
is
have conversation.
why.
Now you've revealed this. You know we're gonna have some conversations
No,
offline
you know
about this.
what?
I'm not
You
happy.
know what? I, I I've gone into 2025 with a complete different mindset.
Good.
But 2024, that's where I was at. And then when my grandmother died, that was it. It was just like, you know what? Like, yeah, this is your life, and this is going to be your life for the rest of your life because you didn't do X, Y, Z. However, what happened when my grandmother died is because she had always been the person to take care of me, almost like she died, and I was like, I know she's gonna take care of me now. She's gonna take care of me, and she's got more powers than what she had before. She's now in heaven. She's got special powers, so things are gonna start to change.
And
But
she's
the
also
sadness,
also instilled in you with her love all of the tools
yeah.
that you need to get through it.
And you know what? Like the the sadness didn't go, but the mindset started to
Yeah.
change in a sense because I'm just like, my nan's got me. My nan's got me in the boys. She's
And
got
that's
me.
okay
She's
if the
got me.
sadness never goes because grief is the price we pay for love. And
Mm.
you just want it
It
to be
showed.
able to
It was,
change and become manageable. So
Yeah, and it's your almost the grief is like the measure of your love. Do you know
yeah.
what I mean? So yeah, I fully hear that and understand that. So yeah, so I started to I started a TikTok channel.
Hmm.
Um, throughout my grief.
What's the
So I
handle?
started.
Have you remembered what your own handle is yet, or do you need me to
Yeah, yeah,
to
no,
put
I
it on
do.
TikTok?
So Shell Spiritual, it's that Shell Spiritual. I believe you're gonna tag
Yeah,
at
I'm
the
gonna
end
tag it in the
of the
comments.
podcast.
Yeah.
But I started this in August 24. As I said, I was in a terrible place myself. But for me, I just wanted to. I know there's other people out there like going through grief, going through trauma, going through support. One thing I don't see. So one thing in my story anyway is I've been through a lot of trauma in my life, and I've always worked through that trauma and then gone on to support people.
Hmm.
What people haven't seen from me is me going through it at that time
Yeah,
and the
live
vulnerableness.
process. Yeah.
And for me, I wanted people to see the vulnerableness. And when I say that, I don't mean because you can go on TikTok and see a lot of people crying how terrible their life is.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking, I'm not talking about, being broke and not being at work and things like
Yeah.
that. I'm talking about the real rawness of the grief and the real rawness
And
of
not wanting to get out of bed every day and the reality of
exactly
what it actually looks like.
and
Not
the
made up.
pain
Mm.
and trying to build a community on TikTok for people to support one another.
Yes.
Because one thing about England is, like all you ever hear is, oh, you should go therapy, you should do this, you should do that. There is no funding.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the people I can't even get support and help for the young people. How are we getting support and help for these adults? How are we getting support and help for the parents, single
We
parents,
need more of
for the
this. We need
divorcees?
more of this, Shell. Therapy
We
can't
need it.
pick up everything, and not everyone can afford therapy. And therapy
It
is not
can't.
for everybody. Sometimes you just
It's
need
not.
somebody that's gone through it to sit down with you and
Exactly.
not necessarily even say anything, but
So
just
right. So this
understand.
is where my idea for this community has come from. I want to be able to train people who have gone through real lived experience, real life experiences, to be able to support other people going through real lived life experiences. And in doing that, I have brought some of the skills that I know people resonate and like and connect with. You've mentioned it before, tarot reading.
Mhm.
So I've brought that to the channel. I've brought quotes to the channel. I do some short videos to the channel. Don't get me wrong, as I said, I'm building this community, going through live trauma, right? Live post traumatic stress disorder, live stresses.
Mhm.
So I've been quite stuck with it in 2024, but my focus in 2025 is to really laser in on it and really build a community of just support and help for everyone and anyone, and
Yeah.
a community that is able to really give back to people and to one another, you know? Like life is only getting harder for people. And I want to make it a little bit easier. Um
Maybe we're idealistic because I agree with you. I think anything that, if every individual tried to do a little bit of something to help a next individual, the world would be a better place. So when people say to me, how do
100%.
you change the world, babes? It ain't bloody rocket science. You change the world that you live in. That's how you change
Exactly.
the world one
And you
bit
know
at a
what?
time.
You know what? And if my community helps one person, I'm winning. Right?
100%.
I've won. Yeah, because I know in my hardest times, especially in 2024. Like I've had friends, but the same friend that I'm talking about, I called the morning trade died. She's fell off this year.
Yeah.
She's gone because she's not there to support me. She's been my best friend since I was 13 years old. You know what I mean? Like I know that in my hardest times, it's really hard to find people that love you and support you and
Yeah,
can
no.
really care for you and will take the time out of their lives
Yeah.
to support and care for
It's
you. You
easy to
know,
say
because
you love and care for people, but it's a lot harder when the chips are down and it's time to show
yeah.
it, isn't it? And that's what you find.
And you know what? You know what I find, right, is that you can love and care for people, right? You can love someone, like because I don't doubt my ex best friend doesn't love or care for me. It's have you got the empathy and the compassion inside you to take a moment out of your life to go and support the person over there? And the thing is, when you're someone that always gives the support,
Hmm.
and now like there's an idea of that person that always gives the support is that they're strong, strong, strong. They can go through anything. They can take whatever. So when you're someone that always you're the supporter, when now it's time to be supported, it don't happen.
And plus, we
You
don't
know,
ask, plus we're not very good at asking for help. So that is
no,
the other part of the equation. We're not very good at asking for help. And also, I feel that with things as big as grief, sometimes people don't know what to do or what to say.
they
So rather
don't.
than just sit with the person and just listen to them, they avoid them.
Yeah, yeah,
And you
yeah,
get
yeah,
that a
yeah.
lot.
Yeah, yeah. But equally, I've had some friends that have stepped up and are really there. Do you know what I mean? And just like will sit there with me, or just be with me, or will just like I've got one friend that's been through quite a lot of grief in small periods of time, so she really resonates with me and connects with me, and always seems to say the right thing. And as you said, like when you're independent, you don't need people there 24/7. So I don't need you there. I'm not a needy person. I don't need you there 24/7. I just need to know you got my back. And if
Yeah.
you ain't got my back at the hardest times, I can't have you around me.
Yeah.
And
And that's what it
that's
is. That's what it is now.
yeah, that's the thing about 2024. The people that fell off in 2024, you can't come back around. It's
Yeah,
done.
there's no space in 2025. We have to clear the space for the things that we want in our life. But
Eh,
Cherelle, I am going to round this up because I can see, baby, that I've had your time for 3 hours. But before I let you
Have you
go,
really?
I
Has it
just
been
want,
3 hours?
yeah, it's been. I don't know how I'm going to get
Oh
this
wow.
down. This might have to be about 3 podcasts, but leave that problem with
Yeah,
me
yeah,
because
yeah.
I knew the
One part
conversation
one, two.
was going to
Yeah.
be real. But what like lasting messages would you say to anyone that's going through anything traumatic right now, based on all the experiences that you had? What kind of words do you have for them?
I would say, you know what? Reflect, right? Reflect. First and foremost, I would say understand trauma.
Mm,
Yeah? Go and really research trauma, understand the definition of trauma, understand the word trauma, because in today's society, that word trauma gets thrown around so much, but no one actually talks about the meaning of
Yeah.
trauma and what that means, right?
Yep.
So go and really understand the word trauma. Is it, are you being triggered? Is it post-traumatic stress disorder?
Yeah.
Really go and understand and research what comes with trauma
Yeah.
and how that makes you
Where does
feel
the
at the
trauma
moment.
start? Is it in your childhood? Is it somewhere, you have to know where to look. And, even as therapists, if we don't know where you hurt, we can't help.
Yeah, and I also want you to understand that trauma isn't something that you're gonna work on, heal from, and done. Yeah, trauma is lifelong,
Yeah.
right? You can understand your trauma, you can understand your triggers, right? But when that brain wants to bring that trauma back up or that event back up, and you genuinely think you're going through that event now,
Yeah.
you've got no control over
You've
that,
got no control. And that's what a lot of people don't
right?
understand. Yeah. You could have worked through
And
trauma, but trauma is lifelong. Every time
it is,
that presents itself, you can be re-triggered. It's a bit
yeah,
like maybe an alcoholic. You have that drink, do you see? So it's something that is continuous. But I
yeah,
I've learned
um,
so much about you, even though I've known you for as long as I've known you. There's been some time over the years where we've not been in contact, and I'm so glad
mm,
that I found you again. But there's so many things in your story that I didn't even know.
yeah, yeah,
And I'm finding
yeah.
that more and more
And
doing this podcast. I'm finding more and more stuff about my friends that I actually
yeah,
didn't know. So I'm actually
yeah,
there like, okay, it's a lot.
yeah. I mean, look, as I said, Lee, I said this in the middle. I respect you so much. I genuinely do. Like, you got a sister in me for life, girl.
Same.
like, I
You've got
really
another
do
sister, the other
respect you.
sister as well. She
Oh yeah,
yeah.
we have one. I didn't want to put
You've
her
got
in
a
there,
few
but
sisters for life,
I
sure.
didn't want to put her in there, but
Yeah.
she knows I love her. Me and her are locked in. We always have been locked in, right? And we're talking about the Alice sister here now.
Yeah, I was with her
Um,
earlier. I was with her earlier.
yeah, I'm locked in with her. I love her.
Yeah.
But honestly, like I want to say thank you for doing what you're doing for the people. I love it.
Same.
I love it, and
We've
that's
all
why
got
I
a
had to
role to
jump on
play.
here.
We've all got a
And
role to
that's why I had to jump on here, Lee, and give you my story because I love what you're doing for the young people. And yeah, we've just got to keep going, girl, and keep doing things like this together, and build them communities for people.
yeah.
Yeah, there's going to be massive things coming in 2025 because I am focusing on the community and getting back out there. But I'm doing it on my time and not for any local
Yeah.
authority or not for anyone else.
And I think I
Like
think that's where you're gonna find your real passion, because I think when you're working for
yeah,
organizations and stuff, you're sometimes hampered by the red tape and
exactly. You're
all of the
dictated, isn't
politics
it?
and all that nonsense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There is
That's why I
none
work
here.
for myself. I wouldn't
Yeah.
be able to work for anybody else ever again.
And this is my new thing now. I'm just gonna keep going until I can earn a living off this and really because this is what I want to do. This is what I am gonna do. This is how I'm gonna support my children and myself throughout my life and pay my bills. But equally, this is what gets the fire in my belly going. This is what makes my
Yeah.
heart
And,
full,
and, and
you
life
know?
is too short to spend any time doing anything less than things that you love. And I
Yeah,
think as you get older, and you'll get to that magic number that will come soon where life begins. Not quite yet.
yeah,
You've got a couple of
yeah.
years, but you
I
know,
mean,
you become more reflective and you become more
yeah,
selective with what you do, what you give your time to, who you give your time to. You try to
yeah,
reflect, you
yeah,
try to not make the same mistakes, but it's all learning. And I think today I've learned
yeah,
a lot about you, and I hope that the listeners have learned some stuff. There's also been some revealing, so I hope you guys are paying attention. So for those of you that like to skip through, you're probably gonna miss a few revelations, because what's coming up next will be a deeper focus on women in prison. So,
yeah. I
Empress,
love that.
I've
We
got a
need a
guest that's
panel for
coming up.
that. So you
He
better,
wants to come up and
yeah.
read the rights.
I want to jump on a panel thing for that. Let's
Yeah,
let's
I
do a
think
little
I'm going to
discussion
organize
for
it. Yeah, it's something
that.
that people that know about me, it's not a secret, it's not anything that I'm ashamed of or anything that I hide, but people can be quite judgy. That's why I say to
Mm.
people, I'm here to listen, not judge. I can't judge
Yeah, yeah,
because I've made mistakes, but what I've also done is learn from my mistakes, and now I'm trying to pay some of the things that I've learned forward. So,
mm.
that note, is there any lasting thoughts from yourself?
No, just
Okay,
thank
guys.
you.
So,
I better get this baby
hey, little C, you can
settled
go to
because
bed
he's
now.
not
Sorry for keeping you
starting.
up. We're recording this well into the night, guys. We have to
Yeah,
do what we have to do as women here.
yeah,
Single parents, carers. We got to make the schedule work when it does. So, I'll try to find
Yeah.
a way to put it into one podcast, but if not, it may be two.
Yeah, yeah, maybe part one, part two.
Yeah, maybe a part one, part two, because it's really important that
Um,
people really hone into the story. And you know, sometimes when things are too long, people drift off, they have short
yeah,
attention span.
yeah.
And I really want to hone in on this. So, yeah, I thought, what can I give these guys to take away? Trauma, very broad subject. You couldn't do just one podcast on it. So, I get this all the time. So I thought, Lee, start from the beginning with this trauma because you often hear people, they go through what I call the trauma Olympics. So some people feel like their trauma doesn't compare to other people's trauma. You see people do it all the time. Oh, it could always be worse, or compared to that person, my trauma doesn't seem so bad. So I thought it was really important that I go back and just define trauma so that we get it into our heads. So trauma, a lasting emotional or psychological response to a distressing event or events. Okay, that's it. So if it's emotional, psychological, and long lasting, it qualifies as trauma. So that could be, something extreme like the death of family members, or it could be the loss of a family pet. Different things mean different things to people. So we're not going around judging our traumas next to other people's. But why do we need to talk about trauma? I genuinely feel like we can't afford not to talk about trauma because to me, I see trauma everywhere. But, I'll put a few points together for you guys. So why do we need to talk about trauma? I think, and I don't know if you guys agree with me, I'd like to really hear about this in the comments, but I think it's one of the biggest reasons why people are unhappy. You see it, you see people these days, they seem dead behind the eyes, they're quite desensitized to things, and you just think, wow, I just think trauma. Some people think like, oh, that person's moving mad. To me, I just think, what happened to that person? But obviously, I'm a therapist and I deal with trauma on a day-to-day basis. I would say that trauma is one of, if not the main reason why people come to therapy. It comes in a lot of different guises. Childhood trauma, like I say, with the attachment stuff. And you've got to remember that only 50% of us are securely attached. So that means the other 50% of us have had some type of traumatic disruption in our attachments alone that may not necessarily involve physical abuse or some of the more extreme forms, but we all have experienced trauma. So it's one of the main reasons why people come to therapy, like I said, but it has some real consequences. So as well as being the reason why people are unhappy, the reason why they come to therapy, it contributes to a lot of long-term health conditions. All right. So you've heard people say it, the body keeps the score. And for those of you that are interested in what trauma does to the body, this book here, I don't know if you can get it, or if I can get it all the way in. The Body Keeps the Score is quite good for that. So if you want an introductory, you're interested in what trauma, so this is about the mind, the brain and the body and what it does when it goes through trauma. So anyone that has an interest in trauma, that might be a good book. I'll put it in the comments as well. So yeah, those people that suffer from long-term health conditions may be aware that trauma affects them. But I know a lot of people still don't realize how trauma affects the body alone. So when we're looking at chronic conditions such as things like chronic pain, IBS, fibromyalgia, which we hear a lot of these days, chronic fatigue syndrome or ME, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, me, myself, I have Graves' disease. I have no thyroid. That's also another autoimmune. So trauma is actually proven to be a contributory factor in a lot of long-term health conditions. So if there's one good reason to try to resolve your trauma, it would be to improve your health, but it also affects us emotionally. So with our mood, so you're already starting to see. But like I said, this book here, sorry, I'll put it up again just for those that missed it. The Body Keeps the Score. It also explains how trauma can rewire the brain. And this is something that's really important because I think it has far more reaching implications. So for those of you that are a little bit interested, I've taken a lot of the science out of it because I don't want to make it a science podcast, even though I am a scientist. We'll take that out of it. But the reduced prefrontal cortex, okay? So that's the part of the brain that controls rational thinking, All right. So it changes the worrying of that and reduces that. So you're going to have less ability to think rationally. So when you think about certain conditions that involve behavior, possibly ADHD, especially if this is going on during childhood and your brain's being wired from an early age, I would say this would potentially be contributing to things like ADHD, which people are always saying, why is there so much ADHD now? I would ask, why is there so much trauma now? But also a heightened threat response. And this happens to people when they're triggered. Most people would probably think about things like PTSD and panic attacks, but it's a heightened threat response. So there's certain regions of the brain that control that threat response, and they may become more responsive due to trauma. So especially if you're triggered, that part of the brain going to feel threatened and may set off physiological reactions. So there's that as well. But a big one, survival mode. Trauma can put the brain into what we call survival mode, and that overrides the thinking part of the brain, and it makes it harder for people to actually process trauma. So they may want to, but they don't have the actual ability to process it through their brain. We have frontal grey matter reduction. Childhood trauma can lead to reductions in this area, which may contribute to cognitive and affective disturbances. So once again, ADHD. We ask why it's so prevalent. Why is the trauma so prevalent? But this is a mental health podcast, so we can't get away from the fact of how much trauma is a factor in a number of mental health conditions. So obviously I've just mentioned PTSD, and I can't forget complex PTSD. And for those of you who are wondering what the difference is, I don't really think PTSD should be a thing anymore. I think anybody with PTSD, the chances are they probably would have complex PTSD. So that just means they have some of the symptoms or maybe all of the symptoms of PTSD, but they also have some type of mood disorder as well with it. And I would suggest that comes naturally. So most people that have PTSD don't just have PTSD alone. So it's going to become more complex, you see. And as things happen in life, that can become more complex. So, you know, the PTSD, so the experiencing, the avoidance, the flashbacks, depression. People will probably think, okay, depression, I could see how that's linked with trauma. And depression is very much what you've got in your backpack. Remember we spoke about that before. And it's very much linked to the past. People that are in depression, they tend to ruminate over things that have already happened. Whereas anxiety tends to be things that haven't happened. But if you've always had to worry about things happening, you're going to worry about what happens in the future. So these two things, anxiety and depression disorders, go together especially well. So there's also been a rise in personality disorders, and there's loads of them, 12, 13. There's new ones being categorized every day. But the main ones that we know about, technically it's EUPD, but I've been called out by some people that prefer BPD as a terminology. But I don't think any diagnosis defines you, but whatever people are comfortable with. But I think if trauma didn't exist, this particular personality disorder probably wouldn't exist either. So it's such a big factor. And if you go back to personality disorders that are recorded with the great Kerry Muzzington, you'll get a deeper understanding, because it often takes a long time to diagnose a personality disorder. So they will look at your traumatic experiences when diagnosing. But another one that people don't necessarily always think about, substance abuse. How are we dealing with this trauma? If we can't process it and we're not going to therapy, how are we dealing with this trauma? Substance abuse, and then inevitably issues with addiction. But this is usually, like I say, substance abuse, people don't usually drink or take drugs, and that by itself is usually combined with a mental health condition. So now we're talking about comorbidity. So that's another term that I'm going to introduce to the podcast. So that's just the presence of more than one disease at the same time. And this is with most mental health conditions. People don't have just one. So I'm ADHD and I'm autistic, but that also comes with depression, anxiety, OCD, and some other things. I'm a bit dyspraxic as well. So there's other things going on. But interestingly, in surveys of the general population, up to 95%, so between 75 to 95% of all people surveyed said they had experienced trauma. There's people that are using substances. And interestingly, women with substance abuse disorder, or SUD, 30 to 59% of them, let me slow down, 30 to 59%, that is a significant percentage, also have PTSD. So the link between trauma and all these different things are clear. But I'm going to, again, throw in ADHD, because I think people need to start understanding all these children being diagnosed with ADHD. What are their home circumstances like? I heard Trevor Noah speaking very interestingly about that. And it's like, people think if you have ADHD, you can't concentrate on anything. But if you grow up in an unsafe environment and there's loads of abuse or, disarray, you may find it better to focus your attention on many things. So, it could just be a reaction to severe trauma. And I cannot disprove that in my case. So we're going to kind of move on to different types of trauma, because once again, I think people don't necessarily always know when they've experienced trauma, because they're going through this trauma Olympics and comparing their trauma to a trauma that may inevitably be a bit more severe, but equally your experience of trauma is validated. All right, so the types of trauma, I've spoken about attachment trauma on here, boundaries, complex grief, domestic abuse, eating disorders or disordered eating. But interestingly, 43.8% of people with eating disorders or disordered eating reported having more than one instance of traumatic incidents. So the link is already been clear with sexual trauma and eating disorders. Some women even using, eating and food and weight gain as a way of keeping the perpetrator away. So we've spoken about that. But domestic abuse. So I hope we're still referring to it as domestic abuse now. We're no longer limiting it to violence. I can't speak today. We're looking at it for what it is. The coercive control now that's getting played out in the soaps. Things like medical trauma. I wouldn't have thought something like that existed, but it's something that I'm now dealing with. I'm absolutely terrified. I'm about to have a hysterectomy and I'm completely terrified that these people are trying to kill me. And based on what's already happened, nobody can tell me that I'm being irrational. So medical trauma is a big thing for a lot of people. And this is why they avoid going to the doctor or going to the hospital or looking about their health. Sexual trauma as well. So some people that have experienced trauma, it comes out in their sexual behavior. So, they may be more promiscuous or engaging in more risky sexual behaviors, but all of this comes back to trauma. We cannot not talk about racism and discrimination. We live in a society, we see it all the time. We've got misogyny, we've got the misogynoir, the outright covert racist behavior towards Black people, Asian people, Muslim people. It's all there. Other races as well, just non-English, it seems. But, all of the racism and the discrimination, that has a real deep effect on people. You would be surprised how many people come to therapy due to discrimination at work. And it's extremely, extremely traumatic for them, and it stays with them. So that's why I always say, if you're in a situation where you're experiencing discrimination, get the hell out of there, because it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Witnessing a traumatic event. Now, this is a big one. Some people don't even realize that seeing something traumatic is actually you inheriting that trauma. So today I've just, the last couple of days, there's been the incident in New Orleans. And just today, a gentleman died from the incident in the West End. I don't know what it is with people driving into people. I don't know if we need to look at this GTA and what it's doing. Anybody that witnessed a traumatic incident like that, they're going to be traumatized. And people don't often think about those people. They stick a microphone in front of them and say, what did you see? And these eyewitnesses, and they look absolutely shock-horrored. Are these people getting therapy? Or are they expected to go home and have tea with a bit of sugar and expected to forget about what they've just witnessed, people dying and all that carnage? So there's that as well. But relationships, people do not think about relationships as trauma. How we give love, how we receive love is usually what we've seen growing up. And if that's not particularly healthy, and we're not aware, we could be replaying these traumatic things out in our relationships. If you grew up in a violent household, you're more likely to be violent and to be abused too. What we're seeing has a real effect, and it plays out in relationships. A lot of people will tell you, my friend's sound, get into a relationship with that person. That's where the trauma comes out. People can be good friends, but that intimacy level. I have issues. I have issues with trust, but I also have issues with picking people that are emotionally unavailable. So I find them in every single guise. It used to be straight women. In my later years, it seems to be closeted women. But either way, it's finding some type of way. You may not always be aware that you're repeating that pattern, which is why I say you have to look at your trauma. And sometimes you might need support with it. So how we give and receive love. Anyone that still thinks they haven't experienced trauma, the pandemic. The pandemic was extremely traumatic, whether or not you bought into any of the stuff or not. Because I didn't buy into a lot of it. But what I did understand is that a lot of people were dying, and it was a lot of anxiety being perpetuated. And a lot of people have still not recovered from that. If you ask me, people are dead behind the eyes. This is why they'd rather scroll through TikTok when they're feeling down and laugh at someone less fortunate than themselves than actually listen to something positive that may make them feel a bit rubbish for a minute, but will actually help them move forward in their lives. And this is what we need to get away from, this apathy. We're not dealing with our trauma because it's too much. So the pandemic was that. I'm going to throw in another one just because I am a Black woman and these things are important to me, but the trauma of separation and reunification. And I'm hoping to do a segment soon on Black parenting through the years. We have to look at the impact of Windrush and people leaving their children for years and years and then being reunited, and the issues that has with attachments. And this is still going on today. People still leave their children and send for them years later. There are still barrel children all around the world. And that causes trauma for both the mother and the child. You'll hear stories of children being reunited with their parents and not even knowing who these people are. So we're going to talk about that as well. But yeah, I think we can overcome trauma, but sometimes we might need some help with it, and it's not pleasant. You might find some things that you don't like in there. So it's hard work, but I feel like people are in 4 camps when it comes to trauma. And I'd love to know what camp you are in. Be honest with yourself. So the first camp, I would say they're actively working through their trauma. So it could be that they're going to therapy, they've got a support group or something like that. They're actively working through their trauma, whatever it may be. Then you have the second camp who are aware, but that's as far as they've got. They're aware that they have certain trauma, and that's as far as they've gone, or maybe they'll ever go. But then we have the not aware, and this is where you don't really want to be. You don't really want to be here, the not aware. So this is why I'm saying we really need to look at ourselves a bit closer. And if we can't do that for ourselves and the people around us can't help us with that, reaching out to get that support. Even 6 sessions of therapy can help you to look at things a bit differently. They're not aware, and you don't want to be not aware, okay? Then we have the fourth camp, which is the actively avoiding. So they're aware they've got trauma, they're actively avoiding it, and they're most likely projecting their trauma onto you. So the people that fit into these camps, I call them the cobweb crew. So that might be a person that hasn't been in a relationship for 10 years and it was like a very bitter breakup, and they tell everyone they're over that person and they're healed, but they never ever have another relationship, and their cobwebs get cobwebs. And it could be the person that knows that they had a really bad childhood. Their parents were really horrible to them. And they know that they're messed up, but rather than actually deal with that and try to become better, or healed, I should say, but a better version of their self, they would rather just project that onto other people and just go around being the trauma. So you don't want to be in those categories. I've been in the actively working through when I was in therapy for 3 years. I would say that I'm largely aware. And I would also say that sometimes I am in that fourth category where I'm actively avoiding. But what I would say is that I'm trying not to put any of my trauma onto anyone else. So I will stay to myself. But where are you? And I would say those people that are actively avoiding are the least self-aware people. And everyone knows somebody like that. They will tell you about yourself, the man down the road about yourself, but they can't see what's on their own doorstep. And in 2025, we don't want to be that bitter person. We don't want to be that person that is the problem. So what can we do? So I've said it already, and I'm a therapist. Go to therapy. Get a support group. Write some diaries. Practice some gratitude. Do something. But I want to offer something to take away, because trauma is such a big topic, and me repeating to you, telling you what trauma is, different types of trauma, most of you will probably be aware of that. What some of you may be less aware of is the kind of things that the institutions are supposedly doing to redress this. So if you're like a teacher or a social worker, or you work in a hospital or a medical setting, you'll be well aware of trauma-informed practice or trauma-informed care. I've seen it called both. And it's a framework that institutions use essentially to help those with trauma. All right. The aim, the overall aim, so the overriding aim is to avoid re-traumatizing that traumatized person. Okay. So it's to make sure that you're working safely. But how do we do that? Because that's easily said in principle. So some of the principles that they have in place, and we can all do, this is the reason why I'm telling you, because it shouldn't just be in a work setting. If you have a friend or a loved one or a partner that's been through a lot of trauma, just by looking at these little things, you could make a big difference to their lives. So what can we do? We can educate ourselves about trauma. So we know what PTSD is. We know what complex PTSD is. We know what the signs and symptoms are, right? So we're recognizing these signs of trauma when we see them, all right? Then we want to create a safe space and a warm environment. Sometimes we may not understand what people are going through, but we still don't need to make it worse, okay? Practice active listening. Now, I've done a whole podcast where I've talking about active listening, but active listening for me and for most therapists is like the biggest tool in our toolbox. So just for those that don't know, what do I mean by active listening? So most of the time when you're having a conversation, you're listening to someone, you're taking what you need out of the conversation in order to reply. Okay, when you're practicing active listening, you're listening with all of your senses. Okay, and the aim is not to respond. The aim is to allow that person to be heard. So there are things that you can do to help you with that. So you can repeat things back to them. So can I just get that right? Did you say that? So you want to be repeating back to them. You want to be asking questions. So I'm going to go into that a little bit later, but you want to be checking that you got things right. All right. So yeah, as well as active listening, empathy and respect. So creating that atmosphere of no judgment. Because like I say, sometimes it might be against things that we would do, but we don't have the right to judge people. All right. But this is a big one, self-care. Now, as a therapist, this is so important. Like when I first started out and we was training and they would say, it's so important to take breaks. I'd be like, why am I taking breaks? I'm just going to listen to the people and go about my business. No, it doesn't work like that. You absorb some of it. And you have to know when to take a break, because otherwise you will be harmful to that person. If I'm not in the best place or I'm in a bad mood and I don't respond correctly to my client because I'm in a mood or I'm stressed out or I'm tired, that may re-traumatize them. So I've gone against what I'm trying to do. So I'm just going to break down trauma-informed language. You know, people first language, all right? So this is what we're doing with trauma-informed language now. I've moved on. People first language. So instead of saying trauma victim, okay, you're going to say a person who has experienced trauma. I hear it all the time. And if someone calls me a victim, I will be ready to fight. I don't feel like a victim. And that's not how I will ever describe myself. So please be wary of calling people victims or a trauma victim. Okay, like this thing that happened to them is bigger than that, you know? No, a person that's experienced trauma, and that gives them hope to recover. All right? Avoid blaming language. What's wrong with you? You see it all the time, people moving mad. And sometimes in your head, you might even be thinking, what's wrong with this person? But if you're thinking about approaching that person or you have someone around, you know, how can I help you? Because their behavior may have nothing to do with you. And just simply how you deal with them could be the breakthrough that's needed in order to start a meaningful conversation about trauma and what they're actually experiencing. All right. So acknowledge experiences instead of dismissing. Because we all have a tendency, when something feels too big, we don't want to talk about it. So things like suicide or even death, because I've spoken about death with some of my family and friends, and the minute you speak about death, they want to close the conversation down. But no, you have to listen. And it's the same with trauma. You might be so out of your depth that you want to scream. But instead of just being like, okay, we're not going to talk about that, you need to say something like, it's okay to feel scared. I'm right with you. Or I don't understand what you're going through, but I will sit here with you. Validate their feelings. You know, it would make sense that you would feel that way given what you've experienced. Is that hard? Even if it's totally different to your point of view. And I've got here, ask questions. So like I've said, I hear that. Have I understood that correctly? I cannot speak today. Have I understood that correctly? And that ties in with active listening. Because how many times do we think we know what someone means, but we're not quite sure? You don't want to have a conversation with people and not really getting their meaning. It helps you to empathize, and it shows them that they're being heard. And that's so important with trauma. And this is so important as well, respect boundaries. Okay, so be aware of boundaries around touch, space, or certain topics. Okay, remember the aim is not to re-trigger. You might want to give someone a hug and you might think it's highly appropriate, but they might not feel that way. You might want to talk about something and somebody else might not want to. You have to respect that. So we spoke about a few. So,
All
Shell,
right, girl.
I'm going to say bye to the listeners. I'm going to talk to you for a second.
All right, cool.
For you guys at home, I will see you next time on the Alphabet Podcast.